What's up, everybody? We had our first foray into the 2024 Cincinnati Bengals season of sorts. The first preseason game is in the books, not the result that we kind of wanted, but fought to the end. Interesting till the end. A little sloppy towards the middle as we sort of expected, but a lot of good things to take away. I think I feel like a lot of good feelings. A lot of questions that we had out there that I don't know that were answered, but you feel a little bit better about. Regardless, the Bengals fall to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in last-minute fashion, 17-14 in the first preseason game. I'm Anthony Cosenza. He is John Sheeran, and this is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast, coming at you with a little bit of a post-game report. John, how you doing, man?
Shout out Zach Taylor for not going for the tie. This is the preseason. We don't want to do any of those things. But I'm only feeling one thing, man. Football.
And you know what else? Jermaine Burton. He's looking good. I mean, it was against some scrubs late, but man, that guy looks the part. I was kind of wondering when we were, he wasn't in there early. And I think they wanted to get some of the veterans in there a little bit earlier, but man, oh man, did Burton shine late. Logan Woodside played some decent football there at the end of the game there, and a couple of nice things. And let's start with this, and we'll go to the box score in a minute. Let's talk about the starters, man, because that's the big thing. We haven't seen a lot of T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow through these years in early preseason games or preseason in general. We still didn't have Chase. We didn't have Trent Brown. But we had Amarius Mims and the rest of the starting offensive line. You had Chase Brown in there, Zach Moss, not getting in there. But most of that starting group was in there, and they marched, man. And granted, there were some twos in there. They were playing against some twos on the Tampa defense, but they did precisely what we all wanted them to do, and they made it look easy. And Burrow wasn't really pulling. It's not like it was handoff. It was a little bit of everything. And I think we're all pretty pleased with what we saw from that first group.
No, I think it was awesome to see, him go down the field and give T. Higgins a shot there in the end zone. It was in double coverage and he couldn't haul it in. But that was the most surprising thing to me, just to see that they let him, uncork one. It's not like a play action boot where he just had like a bunch of space to get the throw off and everything. But the other passing plays, I think, were pretty standard to be expected. The ball got out there pretty quickly. There was one to the flats for Chase Brown. There was like an RPO. I think it was the first play of the game. But I mean, T. Higgins he's dominated in training camp. He's much better than anyone who's going up against him in practice. And he was obviously better than the second string quarterbacks that were going up with Tampa Bay. The run game early on, I think, was positive too. And it definitely helps when you don't have to block Vita Vea out there. But yeah, like that's the same interior trio that's been working together now for 3 years for the Bengals. So getting more reps for them, blocking for Chase Brown now, who's I think more involved in the playbook in general. I just think they're expecting obviously him to play more and just run the ball more. So I think just getting him more experience with some of those calls that he wasn't used to last year. And I did hear Zach Taylor say that Zach Moss just got sick last night and he just wasn't around the team today, which is why he didn't play. So that was, if you're wondering why Zach Moss wasn't out there and Chase Brown got all the reps of the ones, like that was the reason. But yeah, Higgins and Burrow connecting multiple times. Again, that was almost a crazy touchdown, but they did get the touchdown. Joe Burrow, to Kay Adams earlier in the week, said his ideal preseason debut is go out there for a drive, score a touchdown, get off. His wish is his command, I guess.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I'm going to tell you that throw that was not a touchdown, a near touchdown. Granted, it was in double coverage. If you had concerns potentially about Joe Burrow's wrist, the throwing strength, etc., that was what 40 some yards on in the air, and it was a dot. I mean,
Yeah.
really, it was a dot, and he just happened to try and get it to, his big wide receiver who was double covered and just kind of said, "Hey, T, make a play," and he almost did, but it didn't work out that way. That was a masterful drive. It didn't really do much on the ground, but Chase Brown had, I think, a nice run or two in there. He was active early. He had the first kick return. He had the first reception. He had, he was involved early. Nice to see. But then you look at it. Higgins involved early, right? And then you get two conversions from Irwin and Yoshi, respectively. Yoshi was 22, 23 yards, right? Big play from him. And then you have Higgins not only draw the defensive pass interference penalty to extend that drive, then gets the big touchdown. I mean, just masterful work, really. And the protection held up. Again, we got to temper some things because this is potentially against some twos and that sort of thing with the Tampa defense. But this is, to me, that's about as good as you could draw it up with this unit. Really, you may want to see a little bit more consistency out of the run game, but I think that'll shore up. And again, you're going kind of vanilla in a lot of different ways. So to me, it's like no injuries. You scored a touchdown, extended drive, guys are getting involved. Boom. I love it.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, Yoshi got involved with a nice conversion there, and it was maybe the biggest play on that drive outside of the defensive pass interference that T. Higgins called. Also, Burrow talked about after the game if he would even like to be hit like before the regular season. He said, "Yeah, like I think just getting hit once just to get the feeling out the way before the real deal comes around, like that would be something that he wouldn't mind." And the closest he got to hit tonight, I think it was just on like a broken play where he just kind of spiked the ball down to the ground. Chase Brown was in the backfield, so it wasn't called for grounding or anything like that. But other than that, protection definitely held up, and I think all eyes were on Amarius Mims to see how he kind of meshed, and he looked like he's looked in practice.
The guy.
And
Yep.
yeah, it's just he just kind of fits, right? So
Yep.
it was great to see all of that kind of translate into action. He was definitely outmatching who he was going up against and whatnot. But again, like you just want to see it translate. You want to see these reps continue to be built on and look the part in the actual game settings and everything like that. So yeah, no complaints from the first team offense for sure.
Yeah, and then you see Bradley here. Damn, the Bengals are so good. You got to get the refs to negate that obvious PI. I mean, that guy was just all over the Bengals receiver at the end there, in the end zone, nonetheless, which was like, oh, really? So at any rate, regardless, it's preseason for the refs too, as they say. They're getting used to some things. I feel like they were on top of most calls for the most part this evening. They had one that was, I think, it ended up being should have been an offsides against the Bengals. They initially called it false start, and then they corrected it. They made the correct call later. But I mean, for the most part, aside from that play, and of course, regular season we'd be screaming a different tune, right? If that occurred then. But there were elements that I really really liked, and I want to get to the box score in a minute, but there are a couple of players that we had our eyes on in a number of different ways, and some of those players did some things, and some of the people backing up those players ended up shining. So I'm going to start with Dax Hill. Obviously, we talked about CB2. Newton had a good night. He had the interception. Congratulations to him. That was pretty awesome. Nice play on the ball there. Dax Hill had 3 passes defended. Overall, I think it was a good night for Dax Hill, but John, I'm still seeing the issue of coming down with a ball that should or could be intercepted. That plagued him a little bit last year, right? He had his hands on probably 3 or 4 footballs last year that could have been intercepted. We've talked and laughed about it a bunch of that Jacksonville game where it's like doink and then into the hands of the receiver for a touchdown. He had another one tonight where it's like, man, oh, you thought he had it. And then I think it ended up going for the scoring drive there for Tampa Bay, which was a kind of a bummer there. But I think still he's showing a nose for the football. He's around the football. He's getting his hands on the football and disrupting plays. So you got to like that to a certain extent.
I can see that. It was a very impressive play just to get his hand on that ball though that he almost caught, and I don't like he did the whole celebration thing, and I guess he didn't realize that it was called incomplete until it was too late and everything. But it was an impressive play nonetheless. I think the one where he was in trail coverage and man, and it was a really gutsy throw by Kyle Trask under pressure, and he lofted it up in the perfect spot. I don't even think Dax knew that like there's no way this ball is going to get thrown to me, but unfortunately, when you're in coverage like that, you have to be able to find the ball and you have to read what the receiver is doing. If the receiver is looking up into the sky and tracking it, you have to turn around quicker than 1 second right before the ball comes to you. But I think it was 2 plays later where he got his second PBU, and there was like 2 very similar plays where he was kind of in off coverage. He had his back turned to the receiver. He's watching the quarterback the entire way, and I think in those types of reps, you do kind of see his athleticism unlocked a lot more than when he was at safety. You have to remember, he was a 4.38 guy at 191 pounds with 32-inch arms. 6'5", 3 cone is like an insane time, regardless of how large you are. So like so fast and so agile. Like he's got all the ingredients to be a cover cornerback. It's just the instincts have to catch up. But yeah, like I think in some instances tonight, he looked like he belonged, and finding the ball just has to be something that he just has to nail down.
Yeah, I mean, the recovery speed and the recovery athleticism is there. Like you said, it's more just kind of the nuances of, just sensing the football. But I mean, he's around the ball. He's had his hands on the ball a bunch of times, and it's like, man, frustrating. But regardless, pretty good night from him. Up and down nights across the board here. And when you look at the defensive side of the ball, the interior defensive line probably still seems to be a concern. Now, Rankins, not really seen, and Tufele and others aren't in the lineup there. But when you go through this offseason, and when you look at the way that winning score was made by Tampa Bay, that physical run by the running back, a big guy, and you shed off of the roster close to 650 pounds between Tupou and DJ Reader, your 2 big run stoppers, and you're seeing this sort of thing happen, it's a little concerning. And you saw early, guys who were night 2 picks in recent classes getting kind of blown off the ball in the second quarter, third quarter. That's concerning. Now, a lot of time, I don't want to knee jerk overreact, but this was an area of concern for the Bengals, and they didn't do much to quell those concerns, except for the fact that they're going to get some guys back from injury.
Kind of came in waves, I think. The most concerning part, I think, is like this was the prime setting for Zach Carter to erase a lot of doubts. McKinley Jackson's out for a couple of weeks. I think Carter was already probably just ahead of him on the depth chart, but McKinley wasn't out there stealing snaps from him. So he was out there with the starters, or the starting defense along with Chris Jenkins. And he looks like Zach Carter still. Like he's getting blown off the ball. Double teams are just gobbling him up. He was the main victim there on that touchdown when he was just kind of blown out of the gap. And I didn't see a lot from Chris Jenkins either. I think he's got a lot to work on as well, but I think there's higher hopes that he'll eventually work it out. But like this is the setting for Zach Carter to just be like, hey, like I belong on this team. And tonight's performance was not that. I think it helped that Travis Bell came in later in the game. He started making some impact plays. So I think like the third and fourth string defensive line played a lot better, or as far as the defensive tackles go specifically, than the combination of Jenkins and Carter. But those are the guys that they really need to like look competent if they're to be rotated in and out throughout the season. So yeah, obviously Rankins and Hill, they'll be fine there. But yeah, depth with McKinley Jackson out for the time being doesn't look too great at the moment.
We talked, I guess it was yesterday. We talked yesterday about the other pass rushers, Hubbard out, Trey Hendrickson. They need to find other ancillary rotational edge rush help, especially with Cam Sample now on IR. They need to find that stuff. And we were pointing at Joseph Osai. Not much from him tonight, but when you look at Jeffrey Gunter, you look at Miles Murphy, Cedric Johnson. There were some nice I was particularly impressed with Cedric Johnson. Again, got to gauge the level of competition there that he may be going up against, but I was encouraged by most of those guys that are going to be in backup and or grinding for spots on this roster, and the fact that they were able to generate pressure. I think that's a pretty good sign.
I'm gonna look this up as I'm talking about him. I'm pretty sure he was also a 4'5" guy. No, he's 4'6", 4'6'3". Sorry,
Cedric?
officially Cedric Johnson. But I mean,
Yeah.
like great broad jump, great vertical jump, really explosive and fast athlete out of Ole Miss, and is still only like 21 years old. So it was nice to see those traits kind of translate onto the field. A lot of the pass rushing wins I thought from the edges, like Miles Murphy had a couple. They were the type that you had the quarterback kind of stepping up into the pocket, and ideally when you have Sheldon Rankins out there, he can kind of clean up some of those pressures. I would like to see more like inside wins and like setting up outside moves to get back to inside counters, maybe use some power there. So, it was good to see wins off of the edge and take advantage of maybe a lack of athleticism from the offensive tackles. But that's why collectively, like your entire defensive line needs to be able to win these one-on-ones, because if you're winning on the outside with your edges forcing pressure, but the quarterback can step up and step into no pressure at all from the defensive tackles, then it's still going to be a problem for your defense. But yeah, Cedric Johnson is in a great spot to do something now with Cam Sample out. Like they're probably going to keep at least 5 edges, and I would say it's between him and Jeff Gunter. Gunter got, I think, half a sack with Shaka Hayward, and Cedric Johnson got on the board with a sack as well. So quality tape from both those guys. And that should be really fun competition.
So we're pulling up the box score, of course, courtesy of ESPN. You can see that in the top left corner there. I don't want to make a big thing of it because I'm not concerned about it at all. But I thought it was a subpar evening from Jake Browning. I thought he was maybe kind of, I don't want to say he was goofing around necessarily, but I think he was just kind of, playing a little backyard football and running around and see what happened. There was a throw late where he kind of had a wide open guy and just kind of threw it at his feet on a rollout. And it just wasn't the best night from him. I thought the interception he threw was a tad underthrown, but I still think it was a good throw overall. Just a nice play by the defender there. But there's not as great of things that we did see at times from Logan Woodside. There's not this is Jake Browning's backup job for sure. He earned that for sure. The Bengals paid him for that. So I don't want to belabor that too much, but I think we saw the depth of the wide receiver group across the board and into the fourth quarter. And there were some other parts of this team where you go, okay, some nice moments from a lot of players in different spots and some other areas, like I said, that gives you a little bit of concern.
I'm glad you brought up the receivers. I feel like we need to probably talk about Jermaine Burton on a couple of levels here. And I think what Zach Taylor said after the game combines what we saw from Jake Browning and also why we didn't see Jermaine Burton out there, because Burton didn't see the field in the first half. And that's when the offense was just looking terrible. They were going 3 and out. And Jake Browning did look like he was just out of rhythm, which is exactly what Zach Taylor said in his press conference. Quote, "There was zero rhythm. We weren't focused on just getting guys in there as regards to why Burton didn't play compared to other guys who have more experience in the system. Your Cedric Jacksons, your Kendrick Pryors, your Kwame Lasters. All 3 saw the field before the team's 3rd round pick. Personally, obviously Burton's going to make the team. Like, he's not getting cut. He doesn't need to really shine in the preseason to like make the team or anything like that. So I don't mind giving other roster hopefuls more snaps and more exposure in this case. But yeah, like you would think that if definitely when the fourth quarter came around, like Burton was by far the most talented guy on the field. And that's why he made 2 phenomenal deep catches and one of them being a touchdown. You would like to think that if he was out there with the second string quarterback with the second string offense, maybe you would see a little bit more success there. But I thought that was interesting as to why Burton wasn't out there. It wasn't like he was in the doghouse or anything like that. And it's not like he's in desperate need of snaps to make the team, but it was an interesting dynamic to see.
It was some other players that we kind of said, man, what are you going to show us? A la Chris Evans, 2 catches, 8 yards and a carry for 1 yard. So not a lot of, not a lot to hang your hat on there. Unfortunately, not a lot from the running game. And I don't know what you make of this, John. You look at this as a team here, 13 carries for 36 yards. You got a couple of quarterbacks in there that account for, 12 yards on the ground. So you're really looking at, 10 carries for 24 yards, right? A 2.4 yards per carry when you're not accounting for a quarterback scramble. So do you chalk that up to just, hey, it's preseason, it's vanilla, no Zach Moss, you're not really getting continuity from anybody? Or is this, again, a little bit of trending or a continued trend from some of the inconsistencies we have seen out of this facet of the offense in past years?
Yeah, I don't think it's that complicated. The blocking was bad. Like, they have a bad second string offensive line. I thought Chase Brown, his first couple runs were good. He went downhill pretty quickly and he ran through some contact. There was a couple runs I thought were a little bit more questionable. I kind of didn't really see what he was seeing in terms of his vision. He was like stuffed at the line on like a counter play when he probably should have gotten some positive yardage. So I think there's still some more work to be done with him. Obviously, Zach Moss is a really reliable runner who is pretty efficient in the way that he does it. So, and obviously, Travion Williams, like he's fine, but he's not a game breaker who's going to take advantage of bad blocking or just make stuff on his own. And yeah, like Noah Kane didn't get any carries either. It was just Elijah Collins was the lone undrafted guy to get a touch there. So yeah, I mean, there's rarely anything to see out of the Bengals backup running backs, and because they're not really running behind great blockers. It was a bad night for the backup offensive line for sure.
Yeah, and unfortunately, when you talk about, I hate to I don't like singling out certain players a lot of times, and
we got to do it with this guy though.
You got to do it. You know where I'm going, right?
Yeah.
Where am I going? You call it. Yeah. So what? Two penalties there, a holding and a false start. Just issues galore. And now you're talking. He's playing tackle, right? And so when you're talking about a team now that has both Mims and Brown, whoever you want to pop in there as the starter, I still think it's going to be Brown, at least initially, despite the great things we've seen from Mims. But I wouldn't be surprised either way. But that's irregardless of the of the player we're talking about. It just hasn't come together. It hasn't come together. There's been the flash in the pan stuff like the Buffalo playoff game a couple of years ago where you go, hey, that pretty sound performance from Carman, despite all kinds of different things. But obviously weather and different elements were at play there. It just hasn't come together. And when you talk about a second round pick on a player like that, it's a shame. It really is.
Yeah, so he was penalized for, I think he was like 2 false starts.
I said 2. Was I being generous? Yeah, good God.
No, because it was 2 of each, right? It was 2 holdings, 2 false starts. I think the last play too, he could have easily gotten called for holding, and it was the pressure that forced Logan Woodside to
see. I was on Team Carman. I'm like being nice. I'm cutting his penalties in half.
You gotta call a spade when it calls for it, and it's like it's not like. There's a difference between dogging on a guy, but also like this film is out there. Like his teammates are going to watch it. The coaches are going to watch it. And I'll just say like keeping a guy like that in the building when this, like after this is just, it kind of negates the standard that you're trying to set. Like it was to be honest, like it was an unprofessional outing from a guy who's like, he's still relatively young, but this is his 4th year. This is his 4th preseason. He led the team in snaps. That's not a good sign if you're entering a contract year. Like typically those are rookies and guys who are like fighting tooth and nail to make the team. He got the most run because unfortunately he still needs the snaps because he can't get the simple mundane things down. Multiple false starts out of a guy who's about to be a veteran is borderline unacceptable. And the reps are just not coming together, man. It's like, I get the draft status aspect kept him on the team for the past couple of years, and they were just dying to see if they can salvage something out of him as a reserve. But right now, he doesn't look to be deserving of a roster spot at all.
Yeah. And you mentioned the false starts, the amount of them, and doing so at home. A veteran guy doing that at home, it's just, I get that there's a little bit of a carousel of which quarterback you may or may not be playing with, but still rough outing for him. You look at this and you kind of wonder a little bit as to how the Bengals had this as a game that was theirs at the end, really. 22 first downs for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers against 12 for the Bengals. And John, I think some of these, you look at the passing first downs, 15-10 in favor of the Bucs. Rushing first downs 5-1 I mean, these are, this is pretty lopsided here. Third down efficiency, 6 of 17 as opposed to 3 of 11 for the Bengals. Both teams 1 for 2 on fourth downs. Look at the amount of plays. Tampa Bay ran 23 more plays, 73 to 50. They had 390 total yards. The Bengals had 288. Both had 11 drives. And you look at some of this stuff, and this right here probably tells the story, right? This is how the Bengals got in this. When you're looking at, man, there's a lot of disparity with the total plays and everything mentioned above. 5.8 yards per play for the Bengals as opposed to 5.3 for Tampa Bay. So I don't know what you can take away from this in preseason game 1. The Bengals were outpossessed of the football, almost 36 and a half minutes by Tampa Bay to 23 and a half minutes or so with the Bengals. So, I mean, there's a lot of things where you go, man, they kind of got dominated in a lot of ways, but they also had the one methodical drive, and then, they kind of started putting things together at the end. And there was, as you mentioned, that dry spell in the second and third quarters.
Yeah, I mean, again, like it just didn't come together for Browning and those guys, and there's no backup quarterback competition here between him and Woodside. I think Woodside just ended up connecting with Burden because Burden is much more talented than the Buccaneers' third string.
And he kept looking
at
him.
there.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Right. I think it was Hayes who was the guy that they just kept picking on, who completely assaulted Akeem Butler in the end zone for a non penalty there. But yeah. I mean, I'm not surprised by the possession just because both punters got a lot of work in there as well. I think Rico had arguably the longest punt, but it was sailed into the end zone, which I would imagine is something that Darren Simmons loves, but also hates at the same time. Like, obviously, you love that bunch of power, but you want to make sure you get some backspin on there and pin the opposing team deep there next to their own end zone. So, yeah, it was definitely a mixed bag, I would say. And I think there are questions to be asked about, what are the strengths and weaknesses of this team and how does that kind of factor into what this roster looks like? To me, I don't think there's more than like 8 rosterable offensive linemen, and that can help out keeping an extra defensive lineman, can help out keeping an extra secondary person or player in the secondary. And speaking of the secondary, Anthony, it seemed like the only injury to worth note was happened to Dijon Anthony, who looked like he just had a bloody nose, but he ended up being in the blue tent for a lot longer than you would expect for something like that. So I don't think we heard like an update from Zach Taylor, but hopefully he's all right. It's not more than just bloody nose.
Yeah, they were tending to it for a while on the field too. So I don't know if someone got their hand in there and actually maybe, I don't know, but busted his nose, broke his nose, or did something, or just kind of got cut. I don't know. When he went in there and I saw him kind of roaming around the line of scrimmage and read the play pretty well and tackled the ball carrier down by the ankles on that play. But obviously something happened. Maybe the foot of that ball carrier came up into his face mask, that sort of thing. So we'll have to find out more about that. But and he's been looking pretty good here too. So you want to make sure that he's on the up and up there. We're going to be here just a couple more minutes talking about who's trending up maybe, and some other takeaways on the Bengals 17-14 loss in preseason week 1 to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's John Sheeran. I'm Anthony Cosenza. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. We're coming at you with a post-game report late. We're burning the midnight oil, almost literally, at least Eastern time, on Saturday evening, talking to you about what happened on Saturday. And we got a lot of people tuning in. That's fantastic. We appreciate you tuning in live. If you are unable to tune in live, I get it. It's late. And so you can get this show on a number of other platforms, whether it is our YouTube channel, and you can access that YouTube channel. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can check out the show icon underneath John on that right hand bottom part of the screen there. Click that. Click the subscribe button, click the bell to be notified when we go live, when new content is available. You can also get some content not only from our podcast and our live shows, our videos, but also our stories on cincyjungle.com on the Cincy Jungle Facebook page. So go give that a thumbs up. And if you like the audio side of things, maybe on your commute to work or all that kind of stuff, you can subscribe to the Believe in Cincy, BLEAV in Cincy podcast channel with our show 3 and Out with Jason and Kevin, talking football with Bengal Jim and friends, as well as Matt and Willie No Ball with the great Coach Matt Minnick and Willie Lutz, giving you all kinds of knowledge there, and that is on your favorite streaming platform. You got to resubscribe to the podcast channel, though. We have a new feed, new stream, so subscribe to that. Leave us a rating if you can. We appreciate you hanging with us in the transition there. It's been a great transition. Believe has been kind to us. We're going to have some cool guests coming up on some future shows within and outside of the Believe Network, but we're excited to be part of the Believe Network. So go subscribe how you can. And I would be remiss if I did not point out the great work that my co-host is doing over at A to Z Sports as well, covering the Cincinnati Bengals and the AFC North. So go check out what John's doing over at A to Z Sports.com as well. Who won the game, please? Cristobal Barahona. You want to tell Cristobal who won the game?
Is this a
John?
Bucks fan? What's up?
I don't
man?
know.
I don't know. From Tampa.
Yeah.
I guess the Bucks won. We'll see how that impacts the season.
They won. Congratulations on your preseason crown, your preseason week 1 crown. I hope you enjoy it and wear it proudly. Who else is trending up, John? I mean, I think we talked about some of those edge rushers, and there are some other players. I think Newton had a good night, right? I mean, obviously the big play, the interception, but you like to see that in general, and they liked his maturity, his football IQ, his savviness on the field, and it kind of showed right away in that first preseason game. Unfortunately, Dijon Anthony, his night kind of ended early. He's been showing a lot of things in practice, but I don't know. Who else are you seeing right now where you go, hey, I liked what I saw here. Let's see a little more, or this is a guy who could sneak his way onto the final roster?
Yeah, I think just looking at the guys who have a lot riding on, whether it just be making the team or like the role that they have. I think Yoshi is very much clearly locked in as wide receiver 3.
He looks good, man. He looks good.
Yeah, like along with just the catch, I think he got into it in terms of run blocking, which is definitely important to just be on the field all the time in that role and in the slot. And whether he is in the slot full time or whether he just moves around like that, that's great for him. Amarius Mims not having like a bad rep definitely checks that first box for him. Just seeing everything kind of translate. I thought Matt Lee looked good when he finally got onto the field. He's clearly like center 3 behind both Trey Hill and Ted Karras, but I think he put on some positive tape while Trey Hill was more kind of up and down. So we'll see if Lee gets some more playing time here in the next couple of weeks. Cedric Johnson, again, I think battling for edge 5, getting a sack there, getting a lot of good pressure and good reps out there. And like you said, Fig Newton, right? I mean, interception never hurts. And he's making the team, obviously. And I think he was probably cornerback 5 entering the game. And, we'll see how the Dax Hill, DJ Turner thing kind of ends up being. But if you're talking about the first cornerback off the bench, like, I don't think they would have a problem with it being Josh Newton at this point. He's been getting work both in the slot and on the boundary. And just to come back into the game after it looked like he may have gotten injured, but I think he just got blown up by a block and had to take a minute to kind of rest. But it wasn't just the interception. He got in on a couple of tackles, and he just looks like a gamer, man. So they want to keep those guys on the field as much as possible.
Yeah, Tanner McLaughlin, I've been all over him since the Bengals drafted him, but a catch for a 23-yard catch. When you're getting 23-yard catches from your reserve tight ends, that's a nice thing. And he was open on another play, and I think Woodside just missed him late in the game, so he would have had another nice play. So I think he's got a nice future with this team as a reserve player. Eric All got on the field and didn't notch a stat, but good for him to get on the field after everything he has been through as well. So I thought those were a couple of players. I waver on Mayema Jung Maida's night, right? I feel like he was very active. I feel like there was a lot of positive plays, but then you saw late the push in the run game from the Buccaneers and some other things where you go, okay, well, I don't know. Is this to me, it felt very Vinny Ray-esque, right? It was just around the ball a lot, make some nice tackles, make some nice plays, but also just not wow plays necessarily. And there are the couple of hiccups from the defense overall with that player in the lineup. So I think for an undrafted free agent player, I thought he played pretty well. I still think also you're like, man, maybe he built up his own expectations in this game alone for me a little bit, where I go, man, I almost want to see a little more, but I did like what I saw in some moments.
I love the Vinny Ray comparison. You're talking about someone who went undrafted, wasn't a very good athlete in college at Wisconsin. I think he ran like a 4.91 at the combine, and he ran like a 4.8 at his pro day, but incredibly smart. He was like a double major in both like finance and investment banking. So he's going to go to Wall Street after his NFL career has ended. But he was really productive at a really big school, and I think that is just a great comparison to that type of playing style, just being active and just being in the gap and getting your nose dirty and everything. I think he led the team with 10 tackles and like 5 linebackers sounds like the number to probably keep. And you're talking about 2 starters and Jermaine Pratt, Logan Wilson. You had Akeem Davis-Gaither right off of the bench as the first backup, Joe Bocci. And it might just be in Jong Meta, who's linebacker 5. And I think that role is mainly just going to be, hey, like, what can you do on special teams more than just how can you stop the run? Because he's never going to see the field on defense outside of injuries. So he still, I would say, has to earn it through just kickoff teams and punt teams and whatnot. But he looks to be that 5th linebacker right now on the depth chart, which is nice.
Yeah, I mean, they're looking for somebody to fill that Jordan Evans / Marcus Bailey role that's been out there for where you're getting on the fields, spot play here and there, but special teams, that sort of thing. And maybe that's where he fits. Cristobal, I apologize. I apologize. You said I didn't see the game. 17-14, the Bucs beat the Bengals. It was actually pretty exciting towards the end there. Bengals came back with a couple minutes remaining, got in the end zone with Jermaine Burton on a touchdown grab. And then the Bucs kind of marched down in a very, very physical run with under a minute to play. Sealed the fate there. The Bengals kind of made it interesting towards the end there, but fun game for a preseason game for the most part. You really just wanted to watch quarter 1 and quarter 4 though. Yeah. I mean, that's more or less how preseason NFL football is right now. So regardless, I think even with a loss, I think at least I am. I don't want to speak for you, but I think people can walk away from this one and say, I feel pretty positive. Like, Burrow looked sharp. The offense looked sharp. And that was without Chase and Burton in there, as well as Trent Brown, Zach Moss. It was most of their starters, but definitely not all of them. And, you kind of say, hey, they looked really, really good. And this game was pretty tight throughout, whether it was the 2s and the 3s and whoever's facing up. And then it was exciting at the end. And some of the guys you wanted to see make some big plays did. So for the most part, despite the end result, I think Bengals fans should feel pretty positive about what they saw on Saturday night against Tampa Bay.
A lot of the things that happened were the things that we talked about, both good and bad, like the offense putting together a scoring drive, backup defensive line getting pushed off the ball, being on the negative side. And a pretty active day for like the entire rookie class. Like Mims looked great. Burden looked great. Newton looked great. Still need to see more from both Jenkins and some of those guys, and Cedric Johnson looked great. So it was a good first exposure to what this team is. And yeah, 2 more preseason games to go.
What do you think is and I don't think he's had yet to commit to this, he being Zach Taylor. What do you think the rest of the preseason looks like for this starting offensive group, Joe Burrow and company, or what should it look like now based on what we saw? It's not like they went out there and it's like, oh man, they put together 2 3-and-outs. Like, it was dominant. So do you want to just see that, hey, just 1 drive a game, 2 drives a game now going forward? Or is it like, all right, let's just pull the reins back a little bit now. We saw what we needed to see in this first game. In your eyes?
If I were to guess, I would say it's the same plan next week. Give him a full drive, and if it goes 3 now, give him another drive, and then none of the starters play week 3. I think week 3 is now looked at as like what week 4 used to be, which is the Colts game where all the backups play. So I think being on the road against the Bears, I think that's a good final setting for the starters to get some exposure. And yeah, I think as long as they see what they saw tonight, I don't think there's any pressure to play them in week 3.
Yeah, fun game coming up here with who knows what the Bears will do with Caleb Williams, et cetera. But fun game on the horizon here with the Bengals in the preseason. But I'm hard pressed to disagree with you. I mean, I think you're looking again at most a quarter of play from the starting offensive unit in this next game. And then I think, like you said, it is kind of like preseason game 4, what preseason game 4 used to be. And that one's more the audition for players really vying for those final spots there. But I will say this, and we can end on this here as we get close to Sunday morning for some of you. Maybe some of you are already on Sunday morning tuning in live here. We got a lot of people tuning in live. This is awesome. I will say this. I do think that we will once again see the Bengals make a move, potentially more than one move after final cuts. I think there were still some issues at some spots that we had some questions. And this is part of what preseason is about. You can say, hey, you coach speak up players, and you can, all the players can do their player speak, and hey, everything's great. But sometimes when you actually have game film, live snaps against another team, that sort of thing, and the issues that you do worry about are still kind of there in one form or another. If this kind of continues in some of the problem areas that we mentioned earlier tonight, I mean, I could see the Bengals looking again at the waiver wire towards the end and right before the regular season begins to just finalize their roster.
If I were to have a tinfoil hat, I'd be wearing it right now and saying that the only reason to keep Jackson Carman at this point is to play him so much that he may luck into some positive plays, and you can conduct another Billy Price for BJ Hill type trade. I mean, at this point, like if that ends up being his legacy, like I think people will be smiling about it. But yeah, I have to imagine that they're looking for the next version of BJ Hill somewhere out there in the league, and it's just tough with the injuries that they have at that spot, knowing that they don't have enough right now to feel comfortable if week 1 was right here. But week 1 is until 4 weeks, and hopefully McKinley Jackson ends up being fine for that. J.T. Faley comes back. Dominique Davis comes back. Just getting those guys some reps in the final preseason game will be useful for them. But yeah, like they need to start thinking about alternative options there for sure.
I'm interested to see Davis. I think we've seen some flashes from Tufele enough that he's a guy that they can kind of say, hey, he's kind of a backup guy. And I think, they've got some guys there, but Davis has been kind of a preseason hero in the past. And you kind of go, okay, is this now because of what they have done at that position? And it's a little bit more open for somebody to sneak their way on. Is this where Davis kind of makes his mark there? So we will see, but we've got 2 more preseason games to get to, and we will cover them on CincyJungle.com, on the Believe in Cincy podcast network, as well as on A to Z Sports with John Sheeran covering the Bengals and the AFC North. We're going to bring you all kinds of more shows, interviews, and analysis, and us yammering along, but we just appreciate you all tuning in. We got a lot of people tuning in live, and it is late. And we appreciate you tuning in live. And this is, despite the result tonight, despite the end result, I think there is a lot to be excited about, and some important players continued the hype and the momentum, right? Yoshi, Burton, a lot of, we talked about them. So I think that is where we can kind of hang our hat of optimism here going forward. And we'll be coming at you on this show on CincyJungle.com, on A to Z Sports.com. So subscribe, do all the things. I don't want to keep yammering on what you got to do, but find us if you can, and subscribe, leave a review. We appreciate it. John, I know it's late for you, man. I know you've been burning the midnight oil on A to Z, and I appreciate you coming on so late, man, and giving your astute observations as you always do.
Hey, man, after the finest Americans I know brought us home a gold today in Paris on the basketball court, that's the least I can do.
Yeah,
I've never rooted once for Steph Curry. I've always rooted for LeBron in that rivalry. So watching those guys play together and dominate like that was history in the making right there. I was privileged to witness that.
Pretty cool. But hey, let's you guys all go enjoy the rest of your weekend. We're going to try and do the same, but we'll get at you with some more analysis on this show and on the respective websites. So go check it out. Appreciate you all. Thank you for tuning in live. Thank you for listening after the fact. This is the Orange and Black Insider. He's John. I'm Anthony. And we're going to get out of here. Take care.